Zenless Zone Zero is the newest Hoyoverse title officially releasing worldwide on July 4th, and I thought I will make some kind of pre-release analysis on its combat mechanics, team building and unit strength. This also means these are just my thoughts on the game based on my knowledge and experience from the CBT2 and CBT3 as well as some early theory crafting, and I will make a follow-up video after the game has released. While you can still get around just mindlessly smashing any button you have on your keyboard in the early game with any characters you want, understanding how to build your teams for the late game is crucial to successfully clear any endgame content Hoyo will provide us, mainly the Holo Zero and the Shiyu Defense. So let's talk about ZZZ and how to build your teams and which characters to look out for.
Disclaimer, again, this video is based on my experience with the CBT2 and CBT3 and early calculations based on those, and may change when the game releases and new information is found.
Before we can actually talk about how to build teams, we have to understand how the game works at its fundamental level. At least a bit. I will try to keep it simple, hence bear with me, but if you think you already know everything, you probably don't, to be honest, but anyway, in that case you can use the chapters to skip ahead. Your team is composed out of 3 characters, which are called agents in this game, and each agent has 1 out of 5 attributes: physical, fire, ice, ether or electric, 1 specialty, attack, stun, anomaly, defense or support, and 1 more attack type, slash, strike or pierce. As of the CBT3, attack types honestly seem to be less used and more of a leftover from the CBT2, but I wanted to include it here anyway regardless. Furthermore, every character is also part of a faction, for example Grace, Ben and Kolida being with Belobog Heavy Industries, or Nicole, Nekomiar and Anby being with the Cunning Harris. Depending on your speciality, you may want different level resources, but more importantly, weapons for your agents. Weapons have an effect which is only active if the equipping agent has the weapon's respective speciality. For example, for Alan Joe's signature weapon, Deep Sea Visitor, the effect of gaining increased ice damage and crit rate upon using dash attacks or dodge counters can only be triggered if the equipping character has the attack speciality, which fortunately Alan does have. Aside from the basic dodge, special and QTE skills, every agent also has a core skill, which not only provides a passive special effect for the character themselves or even your team, but also grants a stat bonus or another special effect if you have at least 2 agents of the same attribute or faction in your team. For example, 2 ice-type characters or 2 characters of the Cunning Harris faction. This basically means when building a team, we want to make sure as many, if not all, of their core skills are taken care of and active. But I will get back to this a little bit later. Let's quickly talk about anomalies. Well, it will actually not be that quick. However, anomalies are basically status effects which are triggered when you have built up enough anomaly on an enemy. The anomalies in this game are Burn, Shatter, Shock, Assault and Corruption, as well as a 6th special case called Disorder.
I will get back to Disorder in just a bit, but let's first cover the others. Let's take an example here.
When attacking enemies with fire-type attacks, you will build Fire Anomaly on enemies. If it reaches a specific threshold, which by the way is different for every anomaly, Burn is applied. To simplify this, you can think of this threshold as some kind of health. As an example, if you attack with skill A, you inflict 2 anomaly and you need 100 anomaly to trigger the anomaly effect. Enemies you will face can be of different types as well, and certain enemy types also have a specific weakness to specific elements, which can change or enhance certain anomaly debuffs. For example, fire type attacks against organic enemies, which then could enhance the burn effect so it deals more damage. This anomaly build-up, as it is called in-game, is independent between the 5 attributes, and they do also not interfere with each other. However, enemies will also build up resistances against a specific enemy when applied too often. While you may need 10 hits for your special skill to apply the first instance of, for example, Assault, after you have assaulted an enemy 3 times, you now will need 12 hits. This also means while mono-element teams are possible, you cannot solely rely on that specific anomaly effect all the time, at least not if the fight takes a long time. Which brings us to Disorder. Disorder is a special anomaly which is triggered when applying an anomaly debuff different to the previous one. For example, if you apply burn first and then you apply shock, in this case the burn debuff will be removed and be replaced by shock, and then disorder will be triggered. Disorder deals damage based on the remaining procs and time of the initial debuff, in this case burn, and this also means the faster you can apply the second anomaly debuff, the higher the damage will be. I am personally not sure how it works with Assault and Shatter for now, but we will find out when the game releases. That being said, this now also allows for non-mono anomaly teams, or in other words, disorder teams. Last but not least, the damage dealt by each anomaly is influenced by a stat called Anomaly Proficiency, whereas each point in AP, as I will call it, increases the damage dealt by 1%. However, the final damage dealt of the anomaly debuff is determined by the proportion of an agent's contribution. This means the final damage calculation for anomalies depends on the individual contribution of your characters and will hence likely be different every single time you proc it. That being said, this should cover all of the fundamentals we will need for this team building guide specifically, which also means there's a lot left I haven't explained yet, but this is a team building guide and a sort of tier list thing, and not everything you need to know about ZZZ one. So, that being said, let's talk about team building. As previously mentioned, when we assemble a team, we want to make sure most, if not all, of our core passives are taken care of. This means we want to have 2 characters of the same attribute and 2 characters of the same faction in the team, while trying to make sure all of them overlap. Furthermore, we have 2 ways of building teams, at least currently according to my knowledge. Again, this may change in the future. We can either build a mono element team trying to focus on a single attribute anomaly, or going for a disorder team trying to proc disorder as often as possible, utilizing different or at least 2 different elements. Taking a look at every single character, let's make an example for a mono team. Let's say we want to build a team around Ellen, cause first of all she's hot, and secondly she's the first feature character, which also means she will be quite strong, which is honestly also reflected in my early TC calcs. Anyway, Ellen is from the Victoria housekeeping faction and of the ice attribute. Fortunately for us, Lycanon is as well. What a coincidence. This is certainly not intended from the sides of Hoyoverse. But that also means we can already easily cover both their core skills, and not only is Lycanon a stun type who can provide us with large daze build up to inflict additional damage, but he also increases enemy damage taken while stunned by 35%. Last but not least, we want a 3rd ice agent to fill the last slot. This can either be a unit which provides support to our hypercarry, in our case Ellen, or an additional secondary DPS, or a unit which helps us to build anomaly faster. As we try to build here a monotype team, any character which helps us building ice anomaly and hence triggering the shatter anomaly debuff more often will be of great help. So Kako is such a unit who not only builds up ice anomaly extremely fast and efficiently, but also provides a 15% ice damage increase to the entire team, since we have at least 2 ice type agents in our squad. This means for this example, our final team would be Ellen, Lycon and Sokaku. Let's take a different example and let's build a disorder team. Since we now cannot rely on the attribute to activate the core passive of each character, we need to make sure all 3 agents are part of the same faction. Bellabog Industry is a great example here. Using Grace, Collidar and Ben, we not only have 3 agents of the same faction to make sure their additional ability from the core skill is active, but also Collidar and Ben to build stun and fire anomaly with for the burn debuff. But we also have Grace, and she will apply electric anomaly and can hence trigger disorder. Or the other way around. We honestly don't know yet which will be the most efficient. Ben will also provide us with a shield to fix our skill issues and increase our crit rate while we are shielded, whereas Collidar increases enemy damage taken from chain attacks by 35%. Grace helps with shock damage and shock build up to trigger disorder consistently. Knowing how we can approach building a team, let's do a pre-release tier list. Well, sort of at least.
Disclaimer, again, these rankings are my personal opinion and based on a very, very early theory crafting from mine, as well as my experience with the CBT2 and 3.
Let's start on the D tier. It is empty cause I don't wanna get cancelled. Jokes aside though, no character stood out to me as nearly unusable, which is what I reserved the D tier for. However, unfortunately Ambi did not seem that great to me. Neither her damage nor electric application stood out to me, well, aside from her EX special, which actually applies quite a bit, and gave me honestly zero reason to use her instead of other electric characters. Even Anton felt a little bit better to use for me. Billy and Nicole are slightly hard to rank for me, to be honest, because like Nicole has the problem of being the only either agent in the game until Shiyu releases at least, at which point she might actually go up in value. Billy builds physical Anomaly and hence Assault extremely fast, but at least in the CBT3, Assault felt somewhat underwhelming compared to other Anomalies. Corin has somewhat of the same problem as Billy, but her dash attack works surprisingly well for grouping enemies, which is nice. Ben is really hard to rank for me personally again, because I simply dislike his gameplay since I'm not a massive fan of slow attacking characters in basically any game, but he finds himself a good spot in a Grace Collider Ben Bellobok team. To the A tier we go, and Lycaon and Sukaku are, at least as of the release, not only very strong in their respective roles, being Anomaly build up for Sukaku and Stun and Daze application for Lycaon, but they also are part of the Mono Ice team for Ellen, which is likely gonna be the strongest team when the game releases. I'm gonna be honest though, I did not play Soldier 11 too much and my ranking here might be off. She felt like a really good and strong fire DPS with a medium fire Anomaly application, but I just didn't find a good team to place her in. Sure, I could play her in a mono fire team, but why would I do that if I can play Grace Collider Ben in a disorder team instead, which at least to me felt much stronger. Well, aside from the fact you might like her more. In which case you could pair her with Ben and Collider in a mono fire team. Nekomiya is probably my favorite character, at least as of the release of ZZZ, but again, Assault and Physical in general felt incredibly weak to me. To top that off, Neko's kit wants her to attack enemies from behind, but most enemies will always face you at basically all times, and even though her 5th basic allows her to dash behind a target, that felt incredibly hard to pull off and was very inconsistent. However, her raw damage output was good enough to place her at least on the top of A tier. For the S tier we have Rina, Collider, Grace and Ellen in no particular order, except Ellen, whose damage output topped like literally every single character in the game, and I mean, let's be honest, Hoyo wants you to pull for her, being the first featured S-rank character, and while I don't know how fast she will be power crept, her being the first featured character after all, her playability and damage is incredibly high and obtaining her is certainly worthwhile. Especially if you like shark mates, I mean, that's totally normal and a very common thing, right? Right? Anyway. Collider's stun application is probably the highest on the game so far, and Grace shock application is honestly out of this world. Rina provides not only substantial damage and anomaly application by herself, but also pen ratio for the entire team, while also extending the duration of the shock anomaly, while also boosting the entire team's electric damage. That makes her one, if not the best electric support as of right now, pairing extremely well with other electric units such as Grace, Ambi or Anton. That all being said, again, this tier list is very likely to change, but those are at least my first impressions. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you disliked it, and subscribe for more Zenless Zone Zero content in the future. Peace.